What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex. In this video, I want to talk about 5 story questions that I have for Death Stranding 2. I want to throw them out into the world, maybe even give some of my theories on them, see what you guys have to say, and then ultimately we can check back on this video when the game comes out and see if we have these answers to these questions, okay? So they're mainly character related, although I am going to start with one that's not character related, but might get to a character. So I want to talk about the Extinction Entity, okay? And I want to ask Death Stranding, I want to politely ask Hideo Kojima, can this be, something that they answer in this upcoming game? So I guess where I'm coming from here, right, is for the simple fact that we have a second game means that this thing is back on, right? When Timefall is back on, when there's BTs back into the universe, I mean, we know Higgs is back, and Tomorrow obviously has a connection to, being a Doom. It seems very, very likely, right? So you have all of these things playing out, but why are we doing it in the first place? And it's something that, ironically enough, they've kept it very hush-hush because, the first game is kind of a very slow build to, well, what even is going on? And then you find out about these Death Strandings, and you find out that it's the last Stranding, and you find out, okay, you need these Extinction Entities, right, EEs, in order to kind of start these things. And we know that Amelie, or at least that version or the collection of Amelie and Bridget, she is the first game's EE. Now, we don't know if she'll be back. A lot of people think she will be back. That's great. I hope so, to be honest with you. But if she's not back, they need another one, right? They need this other person, ideally, this device that will cause the end of times. So is that Sam? Highly doubt it, just because of the first game. I feel like first game characters can't be it, right? Maybe Higgs can have that power, but highly doubt it. I feel like it's going to lead to Tomorrow, or Amelie is back and they're just hiding it, this entire time. So taking that and running with it, number 2 is Tomorrow. Lots of questions, but the main question is, what is she? Who is she? We've talked already in videos over the past week of, is there a Lou connection? And, if there is one, that kind of brings up its own, host of things where it's like, all right, how does any of that stuff work? And I'll hold off on talking about Lou until the number 3 on this list. But, you can go that way, or you could also go not that way, right? Either way, she very clearly is powerful. And it's kind of things, we've talked about in past videos, but just combining them into this one. She's very powerful. She's got that sensitivity. She's got that connection. Higgs is very into her. So I guess, what part does she play in the entire thing? She's obviously going to be allied, at least in part, with Sam's group. We see her, on the ship, and she's definitely a part of the family at parts, at times, in this game. She's going to save Sam. We saw that, in the gameplay. She saves him against, the samurai. So she's very powerful. She is an ally for at least part of it. But then there's also parts of the trailer where she's with Higgs. She's kind of got the tar running down her face similar to him. And, there's a lot of things that could potentially lead her to go bad, right? And if she does go bad, then I'm led to believe she might be the EE, okay? So that's just kind of a theory that I've had floating in my head. But, okay, I mentioned the Lou thing. Let's talk about Lou. Question number 3. And this is probably pretty specific, and this is something that I would expect the game very much to answer. What happens to Lou? So I'm confused. I don't know if you guys are confused. You can explain it to me in the comments. But, even just what we've seen in the trailer paints a confusing picture as to what happens to Lou, right? Sam, for some of these clips in some of these trailers, doesn't even seemingly have a BB unit on him. And he might not have one at all, at parts of this game. So then it's like, okay, what do you do there? But then, all right, well, we know, he carries Lou outside of the pod in the beginning of the game. But we also know at some point, Fragile is going to be protecting, and then they're going to get attacked, and one of them is going to die. Maybe both of them dies. It sounds like Fragile dies and then comes back, and she transports Lou to a beach. So, what happened? Literally, let's repeat the question. What's going on with Lou? How much is she in the game? Does she die? Does she have that ability, I guess, to, if she goes to a beach and comes back, then she's not really a BB anymore. But once you take them out of a pod, you're not really a BB anymore anyway. We also know from Dead Man, that unit, BB-28, right, was supposed to be, and seemingly was, incinerated 4 years before the first game. So who did Sam even have with him for the entire first game? And the little child that he is, 11 months later that he's nursing, who's that? If Lou actually was incinerated, maybe somebody lied? I'm sure we're going to get answers, okay? But there's a lot of questions there. Lou and Tomorrow, I think, are very key. They could be the same thing, but they are very key, I feel like, characters that this game is going to have to go pretty deep in at some point. All right, number 4 and 5 are both characters. I'll just like preemptively tell you that. But number 4, let's talk about Higgs. Again, I talked about him in his own video, but to put it here as well, he is an interesting one, a fan favorite, one that I think has a lot of potential. In the video I made just on him, we talked about like friend or foe, right? Or both. Does he very clearly is an opposition. He's an antagonist for part of the game that we know of, but we get the guitar. How do we get the guitar? We know that he's going to be more like depth. There's going to be more depth to the character. We know that from Troy Baker. Troy Baker also said we're going to learn about him to the point that you might actually shed some tears for this character. So it's like, how much are we going to learn about his background? And I mean, we know a little. We know how he got hooked up with, actually, we kind of know a lot. Like, about his childhood. How he got hooked up with Fragile Express. How Amelie basically corrupted him. That kind of, death follows him around. Death is actually what elevates his Doom, like, sensitivity and abilities. He needs to kind of be around bad things happening in order to be powerful in that way. So, we know that, but we don't know, whatever, I guess, else there is to know. If there's going to be a change of heart here. Ultimately, too, like, what's his end goal? I mean, you don't fully know his end plan in the first game until you really get there towards the end, right? And it kind of shifts. It kind of shifts because he's technically supposed to be allied with Amelie until he's not, in the first game. So his allegiance is kind of wish-washy in the first game anyway. Second game, he wants revenge for being stranded on the beach for so long, but there's going to be more to it. It's not simply going to be that. It's not that one-dimensional. There's going to be more dimensions to it. And number 5, Neil. Neil and Lucy, I believe, right? His wife. Those two, very interesting. But I mainly want to focus on Neil, right? Because Neil, we've seen as like, we've heard of him as this, and we've seen him as this, right? He's the Cliff replacement. And I don't like using it, like just saying it like that maybe comes off the wrong way. But to be honest, when Kojima talks about him, he talks about basically somebody that can match Mads Mikkelsen and match Cliff as a character. And then where you actually see him implemented in the game, you have this whole background of like, okay, he's a carrier, but what does he carry? And, you have this falling out between him and his wife, and, he transports BB units. I feel like that's going to be the case, right? So you have all of this kind of intrigue of his past life and, where he comes from and all that. But then you also have him, not necessarily in the current time, but I guess like where he's going to affect Sam is you're going to be fighting him in very, very similar situations that you fought Cliff in like the wars in the first game. So like, is he dead? And you don't know that until the end. Is he not dead? And that's kind of like the twist. Like you think about Cliff, and it's this blending of beaches and being able to pull beaches into one another, right? And it's like, we know what happened to Cliff. I guess you technically don't know that he dies until the very end. So it's like with Neil, can you be alive and can your beaches do that? And can you fight Sam in those kind of war-like situations? But clearly, there's a lot of even visual themes that tie Neil to Cliff, and how Kojima talks about him very much ties the two together. He might be the thread. He might be, I still think Tomorrow and Lou are the two most important characters probably in this game. We've heard good things about Higgs. We've heard good things about Fragile, this and that, but I feel like those are the two most important. Neil, though, top three, and then also has the potential maybe to be kind of wild depending on what they do with him. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. Make sure, as always, you're subscribed to the channel, bell icon turned on, and I hope to see you all on the next one.